So last month, on December 4th, December 4th, 2023, we asked our Board of Education to consider the results of our Strategic Plan 2.0 committee and their recommendations, which included a zero tax rate increase bond proposal. The committee asked that the board consider a $361.3 million bond proposal to support future capital needs of the district. And on December 18th, 2023, this Board of Education unanimously supported both the strategic plan as well as a call for a request of a bond proposal. What that did was that triggered a series of steps and timelines that need to be met in order to place a ballot proposal on in front of the voters on May 7th, 2024. So as a result, preliminary qualifications of bond application was prepared for the Michigan Department of Treasury, which basically summarized all of the projects that we were considering doing. Now, I think it's important to note there's room for flexibility within that bond application. What you submit to Treasury is not cast in stone and absolutely has to be done. And in this last bond, the 2019 bond, we've made a number of changes as the landscape has changed around us. I think Oxford was a great example of that. We didn't have nearly as much invested in safety and security as we actually invested out of the 2019 bond. That changed our course of action. So on December 26th, 2023, the day after the Christmas holiday, a team representing the Huron Valley Schools, including myself, Mr. Van Gotham, our Assistant Superintendent of Business and Operations, along with Mr. Wiseman, met with the Department of Treasury to review our application and move the process forward. That meeting consisted of reviewing a draft of projects in detail and providing answers to any questions that Treasury had at the time. Treasury has requested, in accordance with applicable timelines, that the final application be prepared by the district and be submitted to Treasury on January 23rd, 2024. They're actually being quite flexible with us. They wanted it a little sooner, but they recognized that we didn't have a board meeting until January 22nd, which was good. And for a listening audience, the reason why that is good is because it gave us an opportunity to share that application with our board on January 12th, went home in a board packet, and since that time we've had a number of questions from the board, all very good questions, and we were making some tweaks as late as this weekend, actually, based on some of those questions. So thank you to the board for being thoughtful and taking the time to review the 102-page application. So I think it's also important to note that this is a qualified bond, meaning the Michigan Department of Treasury backs, endorses, and approves the projects that we are submitting. They're basically saying, yes, these are reasonable projects, and as a result of that, should there be a default for any reason, they will back that investment that our taxpayers have put forward. So they look at our enrollment. They look at our facilities, building utilization. When we met with Treasury, they asked me to walk through the final recommendations of the strategic plan. They wanted to determine whether or not we were decreasing our footprint, which was part of those recommendations. So it's a very thoughtful and intensive process, and actually back in 2019, Treasury came to the district and walked our facilities. So they have a very good sense of what our buildings look like, what our utilization looks like. And I felt that it was a very positive conversation. We also reviewed ballot language. We've had good questions about ballot language. For example, one board member asked, why didn't the ballot language include the word demolition as a possibility, and that is really at the counsel of our attorneys, and it's it's the last sentence of the ballot language that covers that particular component. So they didn't suggest that we add that language, but we're covered. So it's important to lift that as well. So the application is now ready to be submitted to Treasury for acceptance. And this evening, Mr. President and board members, it is recommended the Board of Education approve the required certificate for final application, which includes the ballot language for submission to the state treasurer in accordance with the timelines established by the state. This is the next step in placing this is the next step in the process of placing a bond proposal on the ballot. And then in February, on February 5th, we will ask the board to adopt a resolution that is the final step in the process. So with that, we ask for approval this evening, Mr. President.
With everyone's permission, I'd like to go ahead and get a motion and then a second, and then we'll open up for discussion. Do I have a motion to accept the preliminary qualification for bonds? Member Cotter?
Yes, I'd like to make that motion that we accept the proposal as written.
And do I have a second?
I'll second.
And, okay, motion made by Member Cotter, seconded by Member Grzymkowski. I'd like to open it up now for any comments or questions. Do I have any? Yes, Member Dodd?
Yes, I'd like to thank the team that's put all the work into doing this and my board colleagues for really digging in and reading through this. This is some of the most important work we have to do, and really having a great team together to help us with this is important. The one thing that I want to point out that was pointed out to us in a meeting is, I'm just going to read a little bit from the actual proposal and what will appear on the ballot. And it says very clearly, remodeling, finishing, and refurnishing, and equipping and re-equipping school buildings and facilities for safety, security, and other purposes. And it's the thing that Treasury asked and that has been asked is you're not allowed to put anything on a bond that isn't a significant part of the money that we're investing. And so they say it has to be about 10%. And so going through the math in all of our proposals, we're more than doubling the investment that's required in order to have this language on the bond. We're looking at closer to 20% investment in safety and security, hardening our buildings, which I hate saying, but it's the reality, is making sure our facilities are as safe and secure as possible. When we attend our professional conferences, a good third of the folks presenting there are building companies and people presenting with new ways for us to really make sure that we're able to be safe and secure. And we want to make sure that we do everything possible that we can do as a school district and that I can do as a voter to support keeping the students safe when they're in the care of our schools at Huron Valley. So I just wanted to point that out. I think it's really important that we look not only at some of the flashy stuff that we get to do, like sports fields and supporting the arts and all that sort of stuff, but really making sure that we are a model for safety and security and that we're doing absolutely everything we possibly can, because I know as a community and as a board member, I want to make sure that we can do that. So I just wanted to point out that language in the proposal that will go on the ballot for really highlighting that at the top as one of the most important things we're doing.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments? Yes, Amy?
This is my first time ever seeing a preliminary qualification for bond. And as Ms. Dodd said, it is 102 pages long. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of detail in here. In our finance and operations meeting, we had an opportunity to kind of pick it apart, to ask questions. There's a lot of language in here that for me personally is unfamiliar. When we talk about bonds, they are not something that we do in our everyday life. And even in a business setting, which is what my background is, this is not something we talk about. So it was very interesting to me to find out the language that is used, but it's also interesting to me to find out how the state of Michigan views this bond proposal. What was also interesting to me was how much work we still had to do. Back in 2018, when we were talking about building futures, we had over $400 million worth of work that needed to be done in Huron Valley. We did an incredible amount of work with the existing bond that we have. But when I look at, line by line, there's still a lot of work to be accomplished. And unfortunately, those things that we identified in 2018, the cost for those things have increased. I would almost say they're almost double. Those are shocking numbers to all of us. We go to the grocery store, we know how much eggs and milk cost. Those things that still apply to building supplies. And they also apply to the wages that we pay our trades folks as well. So those have also increased exponentially. When I looked at this plan, I said, well, what about this? And they said, okay, Amy, remember, these are the parameters. This may change. If we have something catastrophic like Oxford again, things may change. I hope we never have another Oxford again. But things may change. This does give us a roadmap for what we're going to do for the next 20 years. Ironically, there's technology in here. 3 years ago, we were not a one-to-one district, one computer for one student. 3 years ago, we were not. Now we are. How long do we think those Chromebooks are going to last? If you have a student at home, you know that you've got to buy the insurance. They just don't last. But more than that, 3 years ago, we were not talking about AI. Now that's all we talk about, right? All of us are in webinars for whatever our business is, and we're talking about how AI is going to transform what we do. In 5 years, I don't know what the technology needs are going to be of Huron Valley, but I can guarantee you they will not be what we thought they were going to be in 2018. So this bond also talks about safety and security, for sure. It is really the thread that goes through this entire bond. But it's also thinking past, where do we need to be in 5 years with technology? And it's also those things that, quite frankly, none of us like spending money on. Roofs, HVAC systems, pipes, masonry. Those things are things that, even as homeowners, do I want to spend $20,000 on a roof? No, I don't. But you know what? I got to do it. I don't want to spend $5,000 on a furnace, but I got to do it. Huron Valley is really no different. We have all those things that, quite frankly, they just are part of our maintenance that will be part of this bond. And then we have all the safety and security. And yes, we are talking about building a new middle school. But I will tell you, everything else is way more than this new middle school. They really are. And these renovations they're needed. This is not about making things pretty. It just isn't. Huron Valley has some dramatic needs. I appreciate the fact that in our finance and operations meeting, we had TMP and Clark there, and they were able to clarify my questions, to give me the answers, and then the things that we didn't have answers for, Mr. Van Gotham came back and gave me those answers. So I feel very comfortable with where we are with this this bond proposal, and I just want to thank you for taking the time to walk me through how this works. It's brand new for me, so thank you very much. But thank you for the work that went in as well.
Thank you for your comments, Amy. Anything else? Yes, Jacob.
Just in the interest of transparency, I had talked to Mr. Van Gotham a while back about how the bond affects the taxpayer in general. And right now, we know that the new bond wouldn't be sold until 2026. So there would be no relief to the taxpayer until that range, at which point, per $100,000 roughly, so $100,000 in taxable value of your home, you would save approximately $200 per, I want to say 1 mil, but don't quote me. So there is a savings if we don't pass it, but the cost to benefit ratio, in my opinion, is far outweighed by the needs of our students and our community. So but that's all.
Thank you, Jacob. Just a couple of things. As Mr. Dimick pointed out, I think it's important to note, yes, if a bond issue didn't pass, the tax rate would go down. You might make some short-term savings, but the dramatic effect, as a homeowner in Huron Valley, would see on the value of my property would significantly outweigh that, because we want to be a destination. And one of the things that people always talk about is location and the quality of the schools, and that's extraordinarily important. So I know that we've had conversations in my role. We've talked about this bond issue. And Mr. Dimick, you just talked about, cost benefit, basically. And we as a district need to continue to move forward. And unfortunately, we see some districts out there right now that are being reactive as opposed to being proactive. And I think this bond issue is one that is extraordinarily proactive, in the sense that it moves the district forward. It allows our administration to provide the opportunities for kids. Everything that we do in this district affects student performance. And without having an environment that's safe and secure and provides the opportunities for us to attract and retain teachers, has a direct effect on student achievement. And this bond issue is just as instructional as anything else. And I think it's also important to note that we've said over and over again since the passage of the 2019 bond issue, where would we be if we didn't have this bond issue? Where would we be as a school district to attract and retain staff and to attract and retain people to move into our community? And I'm proud of the work that we've done, but at the same time, I made a comment earlier thanking our transportation, our maintenance and operations people as it relates to keeping us going. This bond issue allows us to purchase buses. It also allows us to do the things that we don't like talking about but are necessary, such as roofs. I think, Jeffrey, you provided to the board some of the challenges we had last week as it relates to the mechanical pieces of our district and the cost as it relates to that. And while we can't repair, we can replace and renovate materials. And with this bond issue, we are able to do that. Our general fund is focused on providing direct instruction. 85% of our budget goes for salaries and benefits, which is in line with every other district because we're a service organization. If we didn't have a bond issue, all the things that you talked about, Amy, would have to come out of the general fund, which means there's less money for those types of things to attract and retain staff and so on and so forth. I think it's important to note that as Member Dodd mentioned, in our language, I knew that, in our language, it specifically states that this bond issue cannot be used in any ways for salaries or benefits. It has to be used for those things that are outlined in here. And it's significantly more than just a middle school. In fact, that cost certainly is small compared to all the other things that we need to be able to do in this district because we're such a large district. So it's important. At the same time, there might be a cost as it relates to this bond issue for the election, but that cost is minor compared to the dramatic effect it would have on our school district if we didn't move forward. And as I talked about the science of reading being an urgent, there's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of urgency as it relates to this so that we can provide as a board a direction for the community and for the tools for our administration to move forward as it relates to providing that innovative programming and opportunities for kids. So we always have people in the background, and I'm going to I'm going to mention a couple of people. John Reeby has lived and breathed this last bond issue, all right, and will continue to live and breathe as we move forward and provide those opportunities. I also like to recognize Bill and Becky. Bill and Becky have been at our beck and call as it relates to not only this bond issue, but the planning and architectural work and the making it a reality from a TMP and from a Clark construction standpoint and from a TMP architectural standpoint. So they're here all the time. They're part of that group that's kind of behind the scenes. I always threaten them that they're going to have to come up to the podium, but I'm not going to follow through tonight, but I do want to recognize them because Amy did mention that. So I too support this, and I look forward to this becoming a reality. So we have a motion, correct?
Yep.
We have a second. If there aren't any other comments or questions, and I certainly appreciate the comments and questions that were raised, could I have a roll call, please?
Ms. Cotter,
Yes.
Ms. Grisomkowski.
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Dodd,
Yes.
Mr. Demick,
Yes.
Mr. Wiseman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next, under new business, A, Exhibit D, Special Board Policy Update. Dr. Slav?